extreme honor being here this evening. I didn't know whether, 2 weeks ago, I didn't know whether I was going to make it. This past 2 weeks, I've had a grueling schedule. Someone asked me a little while ago, what's your schedule this weekend? I had to think back. Monday was what, Hartford, Connecticut, Tuesday, Chicago. I'm here today. I'll be in Washington tomorrow, Philadelphia on Thursday, Pittsburgh on Friday, Atlanta next Wednesday. So I'm trying to keep things straight now. Appreciate having the opportunity that you remembered me, what was 5 or 6, maybe 8 months ago we discussed together. I want to talk to you about something that's very close to me, and that is revitalization of inner city neighborhoods. I've been engaged in this process now, 30 years, and I probably will be engaged in the process for some time to come. Just a little background on me. I was talking to some students earlier. I come to historic preservation by accident. I come to it because of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. I come to it by my understanding my place at a historically black college, Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, and them helping me understand about our neighborhoods and what it means to us and how we need to be engaged in them. I come to it by way of the African American church because, as I'm reminded, and even today, it fed, clothed, housed, educate many of us in inner city neighborhoods, and so the bastion of our foundation is in these neighborhoods. I am today the Vice President of the Community Revitalization Department of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Now that's a mouthful. Let me just say it another kind of way. I was minding my own business in Pittsburgh, very happy, working as the Executive Secretary to the Mayor for Neighborhood Housing Policy Planning. I was running the Housing Authority, getting my butt kicked, but at the same time I was enjoying what I was doing. I got a phone call one day from two people that I greatly admire. They sort of teamed up on me. One was Dick Moe, the president of the National Trust. He had been trying for some time to get me to come to Washington, and I kept telling him, I love Pittsburgh, I'm not going to live in Washington. The other was Arthur Ziegler, my mentor and current president of Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, and they were on a conference call, and they both offered me dual vice presidentships, one of the National Trust and one of Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation. I could live in Pittsburgh and work in Washington, and it was a fantastic offer. So about 13 months ago, I accepted both. Now my charge at the National Trust for Historic Preservation is to run the National Main Street Center, which has about 1,600 sites across America, small towns, rural towns, urban neighborhoods, and also to run the Community Partners Program. The Community Partners Program has about $10 million in revolving loan funds, as well as a $25 million historic tax credit program with the Bank of America to do historic tax credit deals all across this country. Pittsburgh, I'm Vice President for Community Revitalization Services, and what we do there is I have a terrific time doing our community revitalization effort in terms of running a $2 to $4 million small revolving loan fund program, and also being engaged with neighborhoods thinking about strategic planning and cost analysis for strategic planning. At the National Trust, as well as Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, I'm also responsible for helping people think about diversity in neighborhoods on the preservation boards and various committees. For this evening, I thought it would be sort of interesting and fun if I just walked you through where I currently am and where I've come from, and then perhaps put some thought-provoking issues out there for you, and spend a few minutes at the end and see if there are any questions related to my presentation. Normally I have 1,000 notes and read from scripts and go through that, but I'm at my best just talking and doing a presentation. I asked somebody, who's the gentleman who was to my left this evening we had dinner with? Where's the gentleman at? He stepped out? I asked the gentleman this evening, I said, do you want me to just do a dry run or do slides? And he said, oh no, for heaven's sake, do slides. I need the visual to do this with. So I'm going to give you some visualization of what I go through on a daily basis. So if someone has the lights, I'm just going to go ahead and start it. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think this is a little bit louder than, okay. You don't mind if I come off the stage and get a little comfortable? We okay? Sure. Great. This is what I do every day. I zip around the country, tell people about how I am currently engaged with the Community Revitalization Department at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm currently running the Main Street program, Community Partners program, and another program we started about 8 months ago called PDI, Preservation Development Initiatives. I am very pleased that we have just started the Main Street Partners program. That's a program that allows us to have corporate sponsors. We are engaged in 1,600 main streets across the country. That then means we have a lot of information that we can provide corporations, corporations in terms of good behavior, good attitudes in terms of working in main streets. Our current partners include Avon, Starbucks, Mailbox, etc., and State Farm. The National Main Street program, Coast to Coast Impact, includes $16.1 billion, which has been reinvested, 56,000 new jobs, which have been new businesses which have been created, 226,000 new jobs, 88,000 rehabilitations. That's on a coast-to-coast national basis. On a local basis, on average, 9.3 million is reinvested, 39-to-1 leverage. That's an estimate. 72 new businesses, 348 new jobs, 95 rehabilitations on an average. And I can speak firsthand from this because the second best National Main Street program happens to be in Pittsburgh and on Southside Carson Street. Main Street 4-point approach: design, organization, promotion, and economic restructuring. I want you to remember that because when we start talking about neighborhoods, that's also my approach, but it goes a little bit deeper: design, organization, promotion, and economic restructuring. See if it works backwards. Also want to call this the boat. Let me hear you say that, the boat. Well, we got a lively audience this evening. The boat. All right, I want you to remember this. This is the boat. This is my boat. Design, organization, promotion, and economic development. Dope. Okay, Community Partners program we talked about. Community Partners program includes the National Trust Loan Funds, Community Partners Network, our Heritage Property Services. We're engaged in Baltimore's Main Street, a new initiative funded by the Ford Foundation. DC initiatives, we're working with several community groups around the Convention Center in Washington, D.C. to make sure that they're not displaced, and at the same time to have some business opportunities there. Preservation Development Initiatives in conjunction with the Community Partners Program. Our National Preservation Loan Fund provides loans to expand statewide and preservation revolving funds. We acquire and rehabilitate historic buildings, sites, and structures and districts and preserve national historic landmarks. In addition to that, our Bank of America Tax Credit Fund is about a $25 million fund, makes direct equity investments in smaller rehabilitation projects. Eligible projects normally between $2.5 million and $25 million in total development costs, and we'll do as little as $500,000 in tax credits. In addition to that, we have the Historic Property Services Program. This is this is West Village, should be West Village. This is in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. And this is some old tobacco warehouses. You can see them from beginning at the top, moving down to the bottom to the right. We've worked with Christian Leichner and Brian Davis of Blue Devils Ventures, and we've helped them through the Bank of America finance that development. The Preservation Development Initiative is funded by the Knight Foundation. This is a program that allows us to pick approximately 10 cities. We've already picked 5. What we do is we go in and we design a package of comprehensive technical and financial services for the selected client communities. We use a broad array of national trust expertise. We build strategic partnerships. In addition to that, it includes a comprehensive preservation assessment. We'll come in and spend a week with you, provide technical assistance, online database. We'll provide our whole array of financial services, including establishing a $1 million preservation loan fund, and we'll do national symposiums as well as publications. The cities that we're currently engaged in include Macon, Miami, Pontiac, St. Paul, Detroit, Michigan, and I am personally looking to get engaged in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And I say those 2 cities because Philadelphia has just recently announced that it's going to demolish up to 14,000 buildings. Detroit's just recently announced they're going to demolish 4,000 buildings. And in my own hometown, they're thinking about 2,000. And so we're thinking of some things we can do there. New Markets Tax Credit. How many people are familiar with the New Markets Tax Credit program? Have heard of it? Well, listen, Two in the back. If you've not heard of the New Markets Tax Credit Program, please, please, I beg you to get on the stick with this one. $15 billion over 5 years, $2.5 billion in year one. That will be let by the end of this year, December 1. It's a 39% credit that covers 7 years. The Internal Revenue Service has just ruled that you can twin it with the historic tax credits. And if I had time, I would also tell you how you can twin it with community development block grant funds, commercial projects, and low to moderate income census tracts. What that means is that the tax credit can only be used in low to moderate income census tracts. The National Trust has recently applied for an allocation of $285 million. We have 5 lines of businesses that we're going to propose. I'm not going to get deeply involved in that, but the thing that strikes me exciting about this is it is preservation neutral. It is not a preservation-based program. So that means that if Walmart's or Lowe's or any national chain wants to use this tax credit and destroy Main Street or inner city neighborhoods, they can simply do that. And what we want to do is make sure it is preservation friendly. I said we had 5 lines of business. They include Main Street Conduit Lending Funding, Main Street CDE Conduit Lending Funding. That's basically small businesses lending by local CDEs. In order to receive the tax credits, you have to be designated a community development entity. There are 2 sides to that. One is a for-profit community development entity or non-for-profit community development entity. If you elect to be a for-profit community development entity, you've had to have prior lending experience, a revolving loan fund, some financial conduit of lending. If you are a regular non-for-profit CDE, anyone can apply. Your mission has got to be simply to provide commercial expertise to people in low to moderate income neighborhoods. Let me just tear away from this for a minute. This is how I got to Washington. This is Pittsburgh. Anybody ever spend any time in Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh? Okay. Anybody in Pittsburgh last year or so? Last year. Okay, great. I got some homeboys, home sisters here. Fantastic. Pittsburgh, Allegheny Monongahela River forming the Ohio River. The Ohio River is one of forever, wiped off the face of the earth, because we were told that urban renewal was the way to go, best thing since sliced bread. Let's move on. Because you know, once you do this, they will come and they will build in the neighborhoods. But you know, we just lost the interior of many of our buildings and the mantle places, and we built this. Yes, it did. About 130 of them throughout the entire neighborhood. Street after street, row after row. You got to understand, in those days, because it was such white flight from the neighborhood, it taught us, those who were left in the neighborhood, that there had to be something wrong with our neighborhoods. After you wouldn't leave if everything was right. And since we couldn't leave to go to the suburbs, we down and bring suburbs to the neighborhood, right? And that's what we did. And after about 200 or 300, I went back to Arthur Ziegler and I said, Arthur, can you kind of help me figure this out? And he said, nah, you fought me the last time. So he sent a bus. And he said, why don't you just go out and take a look? And I got the education of our life. We all did. We went to Annapolis. We went to Georgetown. We went to Frederick. And I tell the story that when we got to Annapolis, how many know what taught somebody a new word today? Muse. Anybody know what muse means? M-U-S-C? M-U-S-C. M-U-S-C. French word for muse. It's an alley. And we had lots of alleys in our neighborhood. And they had frame buildings. And we came back, and that's when I was a little younger and playing a little Malcolm X on you. And we decided that maybe this urban renewal deal wasn't the best way to go. Maybe we need to rethink about this, and we did. And so we decided to do a 180-degree turn. We said to the city, we don't want to do urban renewal anymore. We want to do preservation. And we put by the way, let me hear you say boat. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you about the boat. You know, when you decide you're going to come back and you're going to sit down at the table and you're going to put goals together and a strategy together, this is no different than this. You're in the boat. Now, I'm in the rear. See me in the rear? Now, one of the things you got to quickly come to grips with, I said we decided we weren't going to do land clearance anymore, urban renewal. Well, you know, everybody doesn't want to row together in the same boat the same way, right? So what do you do when people don't want to row together with you? Right, you throw them out the boat. Because we decided we'd have a new goal. And we said we'll use historic preservation to aid the community in recognizing and expressing the unique value of the community, including its building, its history, and traditions. And we said we invite the whole community, including the churches, to work with us as we use historic preservation as one of many strategies, for developing a sense of self-worth and as a vehicle to attack neighborhood apathy. We decided that, and we still believe today, if you're engaged in a preservation effort, you have to have your preservation partners. And we decided earlier on who our preservation partners were and continue to be and change. In addition to that, we did a community needs assessment report, including community subculture groups, nuisance bars, gangs, commercial establishments, education, religious institutions, had to do the community needs assessment. You need to know financial institutions call this a credit report. We'll come back to that. It's so important. When you first come back and you're full of it and you want to do the preservation and you want to get started, everybody's not with you. This is Jimmy Joe Robinson. He's a minister. Now, you need to know, ministers like what? What do most ministers want besides money? Hello? A church, a brand new church. Trust me on that. And right next to it, a parking lot. And so we wanted to refurbish this church and fix this church up. And he said, no, no, no. And he killed it. Gone. And he decided he was going to build this church. And he did. And we decided that we needed to rethink that. And we located all the churches in the neighborhood and mapped them out. And the next time a church was threatened, and this church was threatened, a storm came by, the side of the church couldn't withstand it. It needed to be rebuilt. We went out and raised $90,000 to put this wall back up. And of the 15 churches we had in the neighborhood, we've not lost one yet. We learned earlier on that if you don't market your neighborhood, others will. You do know neighborhoods get marketed, right? 6 o'clock news, 11 o'clock news. Johnny got shot last night. William got taken to jail. We decided we'd have to market our own neighborhood. Some of us lived here for over 40 years. Some of us moved in last year. We're black, we're white, we're young, we're old. But we have one thing in common. We like it here. My father was a pullman on the railroad for 40 years, never shot anybody. The guy who lived next door was a mailman up the street. Great neighborhood. We decided to advertise our neighborhoods. We did newsletters at least once a week. We brought in speakers, Perrin Mitchell, Nikki Giovanni. One day, Arthur Ziegler even shows up. And all of a sudden, Arthur is walking up the street. The guy in back is a Secret Service man. Anybody know who this lady is? You cheated. You knew. That's Joan Mondale. Can you imagine getting up, walking down your street one day and Joan Mondale's just strolling up and down the street saying, yeah, I like this stuff. You're never a prophet in your own hometown. When people come in, even today, the community will only make donations to one institution. That's the elementary school, because we believe that's who this is all about. The legacy has got to be left to the children in the neighborhood. And so we'll only donate to the children. Earlier on, when we first started our preservation ethic in the neighborhood and we were talking with the children, one of the things that this community lacked that most places take for granted was trees. And so we started to adopt the tree program. We literally name each tree. You know, kids, they have no idea that a maple tree or an oak tree, the saplings cost $125, $225. They don't know. They think they're twigs and branches to swing on. And trust me, they will do that. And so we start naming trees after the kids. Malcolm meet Malcolm, Sue meet Sue, Bob meet Bob. And trees began to grow. And you do know, beneath the trees, you got to have discussion with local government, because if you're a designated historic district, you got to have brick sidewalks, right? I mean, how can you have a historic district without brick sidewalks? And they got to be site improvements in the annual operating budget, right? Because when you put the brick sidewalks in the annual operating budget, you can then train young folk in the neighborhood to have jobs that's historic preservation related, lay the brick sidewalks, get a union card, and do brick work, not only through the neighborhood, but on the houses as well. And we did do that. We had conferences to talk about historic preservation. See, because we had changed our goal from land clearance to urban renewal to respect. Our first conference was in Pittsburgh, then Cincinnati, Richmond, the King Center in Atlanta, sitting down, just thinking through about what historic preservation means and how we could use it as one of many strategies to revitalize our inner city neighborhoods. In addition to that, we decided that, wait a minute, wait. Our senior citizens, when they got older, they normally, if they didn't have the resources, went into public housing, and then they went into high rises. Well, if we had mansions that were in the neighborhood, why couldn't we simply take the mansions and restore them and have the community own them and let them live there? And this building is, to this very day, 15 years later, owned by the community. As a matter of fact, I was just on a phone before I came up here, and the staff people in the community were telling me they're getting ready to buy 30 more buildings, because they do believe it is economically viable. I said when I left for college and came back, this was the condition of the building in the neighborhood. And today, they've been restored. Now, unless I told you, you would not know these buildings are affordable housing. That's really not true. It's public housing, because the neighborhood has decided that there's a better way in which to do this. And I lived across from this. Matter of fact, this is the 1300 block of Sheffield Street. And can you imagine Arthur Ziegler, the president of Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, having a discussion with me about trying to save this when I could tear this whole road down and make it suburban tract housing? Fortunately for us, we did take the bus trip, and we did learn that the buildings could be restored, and buildings that once were dilapidated could have a life of their own. But you know, it's really not about the buildings. I remember once I was having a discussion with a banker about the people who wanted to buy and live in these buildings, and banker babble never made it to the community babble. And so we decided to have a discussion about the miracles, the real miracles that happen in financial institutions. You do know miracles happen in financial institutions in the banking world. You do know that, don't you? Let me tell you about some miracles that were happening that we didn't celebrate. When single black female head of household or single female head of household decides no government subsidy, no one leading them, simply decides they want to be a part of the American dream, goes to the bank, fills out the application, pays the $50 application fee, goes through the processing, and every night goes home and prays that the loan will get approved, and finally at the end of the day the loan gets approved. Oh, that's a miracle. Trust me on this. And we said, well, you know, you're advertising it wrong, incorrectly. What would happen if we got a lot of miracles together? We got the sisterhood together, and we started a program called Ain't I a Woman? And they sat down and talked to other single female heads of household about their miracles, about buying property in the neighborhood. I remember Stephanie was on the platform, and she was talking about how she had just bought her restored house. And she was just so proud. And the fact of the matter was, everybody knew she had done crack. Everybody knew that her baby slept in the dresser drawer. And that when she decided to get her life together, she came to the community and they said, listen, got to get the credit report together. And she was just telling the story because it happened that way. And they were staring at her. And all of a sudden she stopped and she looked at them and she said, oh, you other ladies, you think Richard Gere's just going to come in here and sweep you off your feet and take you out here and just get you a house? Don't work that way. The sisters could talk to each other. They felt what that was all about. Senator Hines, before he died, worked with us on Carnegie Mellon University and said on some of the land that we had torn down the structures, we could put passive solar housing there. And we could design them in such a way that it could fit the architectural and historic character of the neighborhood. And they, in fact, became a reality. And we were able to sell each and every one. Now, even though you hear me talking about what seems to be successes, frustrations happen all the time. And they go on. And we're challenged to fix them. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, we were sitting in one of our community meetings. I had left. I was with the mayor's office or with Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, and the community had a community little board meeting, and the same board that you saw up there, and they were having a discussion about the Section 8 developers who came and took over, and the absentee property owners, and all the bad things were happening. And Linda Nelson said, you know what? Even given everything we've done, we couldn't have done a worse job ourselves. We could have just did this. And then she said, why don't we just buy the neighborhood? Why don't we just go buy the neighborhood? And so we did a strategic plan, and we thought about it because there were still challenges left in the neighborhood. High African American male unemployment, gang activity, illegal drug activity, vacant warehouse and buildings, absentee property owners. That plagued many neighborhoods in American cities. You know, this one's not even there anymore. We've demolished this, and we've built 2 new stadiums now. Do you know what most mayors are building besides stadiums in major cities? You're right. In Pittsburgh, they call that the Black Hilton. Jail. Well, you know, as a preservationist, I don't want people laying bricks on jails. I want them to think about the neighborhoods. I need to get them off the corner and engage them in preservation activities. And given the intrusion of the highways and the graffiti, you go back to the table and you think through. Now, what is this called? The boat. Because the frustrations make you think differently and think about strategizing. We do our community needs assessment report again. Now, I told the group earlier, and this is true, if we were having a community meeting tonight, we wouldn't be going through this. This is what I'd have. The map. Most community meetings I go to, I just bring a map. You know why I just bring a map? Because most folks sitting in the room, if this is your neighborhood, what's the number one thing you want to know? I'm sorry?
My house. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to my house?
That's right. That's all you want to know. You're going to find your house on the map. You're going to sell it, you're going to buy it, you're going to tear it down. What you going to do with my house? And I remember after we started thinking strategically about our neighborhood, we decided to map it out. Now, everything you see up there is the credit report. Everything that's circled is Section 8, absentee landlords. That's where they sell drugs. That's what it says right there. See? Black drug gang activity. You see up the top? Can you imagine having a community meeting, having a discussion about the nicks and dings in your credit report? And that's what we did. And we got closer. And it made it almost an L shape. And that meant anything we were doing, the growth had stagnated. And we said, we didn't have two nickels to rub together. But what could we do with the map? What could we do with it? Well, you can make a brand new map. If the old one wasn't working, if it didn't make any sense, the question that we kept asking ourselves over and over again, what would right look like? If we could make right, what would it be? And we said, well, this is what it would look like over the next 5 to 6 years. I am reminded, as I said earlier today, you know, when Disney did Disney World out in Anaheim, he got it wrong. You do know that. Oh, yeah, it's true. 3/4 of the way through this deal, he figured out he was doing it wrong, made a mistake. You also need to know that when Disney was doing Disney World in Anaheim, he didn't have two nickels to rub together. He was poor. He mortgaged his soul to ABC to do the Magic Kingdom where the fairy runs around and taps the kingdom. He did future pictures for that. He got a couple insurance companies. That's a true story. And 3/4 of the way through building Disney World, he realized that these little mom and pop hot dog stands and these little motels that was popping up and the fact that he didn't have enough parking, he blew it. It's a true story. He then said, what would right look like? And right became, to him, Disney World, Orlando. It's facts. We said, if we could do right, what would right look like? How could we change this neighborhood, even though we believed in preservation and we had some of the problems? We didn't control public housing. We didn't control Section 8. We didn't control absentee owners. It was a public, we decided right would be this map. But at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, right? Show me the money. I remember when we first had our community meeting and people would start looking for their house. Oh, this is what right looks like, huh? They're not selling drugs on that corner. Okay. Tell us what the rest of this map looked like. And before we could do that, I remember when we took the map and had our first community meeting, and we sat down and we talked about it. Do you know what the residents did the first night when we showed them the map? Anybody guess? They laughed. They said, wait a minute, you're going to do $30 million of for sale housing. You're going to do $1.1 million commercial industrial land development. You're going to do $3 million of rental housing. You're going to put a development strategy together. You're going to fly over and you're going to, 35 million community, you're going to raise that kind of money to do that? That's when we learned, and I've stuck by this ever since. No community strategic plan is worth the paper it's written on unless it has a cost analysis associated with it. Unless there can be a relationship to what's it going to cost to pay for this. Because sooner or later, you got to go get the money to do this. They laughed. And we decided for a whole year, the only thing we were going to have at community meetings was to talk about the community plan. I remember we have community meetings and people said, well, listen, no, I don't want to talk about that. They're not picking up my garbage. And we say to them, well, fine, call your meeting and have your garbage discussion and do that. Tonight we talk about the plan. Sometimes we have community meetings, they want to talk about schools. Not tonight, our meeting. You send letters out, you call your own meeting. Sometimes they get tough on us. Officer, would you take this person on out of here? Tonight's the community plan. And we did this for a solid year, just talking about the community plan. A year goes by. By that time, you know, folk that stopped coming to meetings, there's only about 30 folk left come to these meetings, right? And so we're sitting in the room, we're at the bottom of Bidwell Church. Lady stands up and says, not that plan again tonight. Over there, you're going to do $3 million worth of rental housing. You're going to do $30 million for infill housing. Another man stands up in the back and says, you're going to do commercial development over there. I'm thinking, they got it. They can recite, they got this. They have ownership of the plan. The next step we did, we decided that the government does too much. Too much. We decided to contact every bank in the city. Pittsburgh National Bank, National City Bank, Equibank, Dollar Bank, and we would only meet with the chairman and president of each bank. And we went back to them and we said to them, this is the plan. Let's do so. Met with the president of all 5, 6 banks and said, this is the plan. And we don't want any money from you. Don't want a dime. Want you to critique it. Tell us if it makes any sense. You see, because in the real world, you lend money. And we need to know whether or not we're on the right track. You know, in the real world, 40 cents, 60 cents, 70 cents on a dollar lent from a bank is considered to be a good deal. You do know that, right? Sure, 50-cent loan from a bank, that's a good deal. How many people here own a house? Not more you own a house. How many people here own a house? How many people are going to be homeowners one day? Okay. When you get ready to buy a house, the bank will lend you 80 cents on a dollar. True. You put 20% down, they'll lend you 80%. Some cases, you put 10% down. They'll lend you 90 cents. That's called 90 cents on a dollar, 80 cents on a dollar. Mr. Banker, is this a good plan? Okay, let's check this out. That was the credit report. This is the credit report. Now you're telling us on this credit report, on this community needs assessment, you're going to change that to this. Okay. Now see, I'm not telling the banker it's 50 cents on a dollar, right? None of us are. I'm sorry?
On your control, there's an on and off.
Have the discussions with the financial institutions. And you try this on for size. Do you know not only that 50 cents on a dollar is a good deal, most banks will do your own loan program for you. Oh, they'll write a program for you in a heartbeat. We got any bankers sitting in the room? Any bankers here? Listen, I've written this program for banks time and time again. Trust me on this. It's Friday afternoon. Bob Williams, local branch manager to the bank. Son plays soccer. He's thinking all day. At 3:30 in the afternoon, he's got to get ready to go pick up his son for a 5:30 soccer game. Now, you know the door to the bank closes at 4 o'clock. 3:30, he gets a phone call. Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Blue, just moved to town. Mrs. Blue has decided that she needs her own bank program. Phone rings. Mr. Williams, this is Mrs. Blue. I need you to develop and design my personal loan program. But the problem is, I don't like crowds. And since I don't like crowds, I need you to write this program out for me. On Monday morning, precisely at 7:30 a.m., I need you to show up at my house. Now, I have this penchant for limousines. Make this one white, stretch. You be in it. And at precisely 7:45 a.m. Monday morning, I will open my door, of which you will come in, sit down, and I will present you with a check for $1 million to take back to your bank and make a deposit. Now, by the way, I need a black limousine to bring me back to my house once I make the deposit. Do you think the limo and the banker will be there Monday morning? Trust me, it happens all the time. All the time. It's called private banking. Happens all the time. Why then is it impossible to believe that neighborhoods can't have private banking? Particularly if 50 cents on a dollar is a good deal. They can do it. Trust me on this. How we doing, fellas? And so what we decided to do in a minute, they're going to tell us whether or not we can do this. I gotta tell you, I'm at a loss for words. That's hard because this has really happened to me. So the community group decided to do, after going to see the financial institutions, it decided to shop for a bank of record, exclusively for the neighborhood. Now, I gotta tell you, in cleaning up a credit report, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I really need to show you how we did that. Is it the tray or the machine?
It's the tray.
Did the tray get stuck?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we're going to be able to. Really appreciate your patience. Your quick assessment is that we're not going to be able to do that, correct? Unless you started from the beginning, I don't think you can start it in the middle. You sort of have to flip it all the way around to the first one.
using the old tray and putting in the slides one at a time.
Okay, who has the popcorn? Did someone take the remote? Michelle? Who has it?
Associate Dean.
I do really want you to give the technicians a hand. Thank you. I'll try not to move faster than you drop them, okay? Huh? You ready for me?
I'm ready.
Bet you ain't. Okay, we've gone through this. Have I lost anybody yet? I hear a couple snores back there. That's okay. So we had the discussion at the churches where we talked about the community plan. Then we learned that that's where all the money is. You know, it's not, the money is not in a warehouse in the mayor's office. Lyndon Baines Johnson did not get it all right. That the free enterprise system does work, except it had been excluding people. And we reminded them of that, and we would take them on tours, and we would take them out to the neighborhood, and we would say, yeah, we think 50 cents on a dollar is a good deal. Let us show you some of the stuff that you can reinvest in the neighborhoods. And we found out that in October of 1994, there was a meeting between Dick Moe and Henry Cisneros, and the purpose of the meeting was for HUD and the National Trust to work together. Now, at the class earlier today, I said one of the reasons I'm glad to be at the trust is because I get to see the cutting edge stuff. And I'm telling you, the New Markets Tax Credit is cutting edge stuff. In its simplest forms, Starbucks decides that it can't go into a middle tier neighborhood because its per unit cost is $1 million. Well, under New Markets Tax Credits, they automatically get over a 7-year period a $350,000 tax credit. Well, can you imagine for a $10 million deal, that's $3.5 million, cutting edge. Then this was cutting edge. Dick Moe, Henry Cisneros getting together to see how they could work better together. I better follow them and learn what they're doing because I need to know what's going on. Back then, Henry Cisneros announced $100 million of this thing called Hope 6, and I understand you're doing a Hope 6 here. Well, the neighborhood had written a plan, and they asked the city to send it in, and the city sent it in, and the neighborhood only asked for $5 million because they wanted $5 million to treat residents right. And the government said, no, we're not giving you $5 million. We'll give you $7 million. And they did. They said you need a community policing program, and you need a comprehensive plan to help people work. And when we got to $7 million, do you know the first thing we did with the $7 million? Hello? What, please? We put it in the bank, and what else did we do? We said to every bank that we went to before, we're looking for a bank of record. And by the way, in order to get our $7 million, you got to bid on our money. And bids start at $250,000 for 10 years. And then PNC said fine, they bought the whole thing. See, because they leveraged it. Because that $7 million produced all of this type of financing for $24 million. It's now up to $36 million. And come on to Pittsburgh, I'll be glad to show you this. It works. Duquesne Light first put up the money, then PNC put up the money. We're on our third bank, Dollar Bank. And every time we went from a different bank to another bank, because you know banks like to buy out banks, they start all over again. Not for year 2 or 3, for the first year. And so those challenges became opportunities. Absentee property owners, we bought them out and we control the neighbors. City properties, buy them out, control the neighborhood. And people who couldn't work before had an opportunity to be able to work in the neighborhood and build their own houses. So the squalor that they were once living in, where those red circles were, we could change. And in changing it, they could have housing just like anyone else. And you don't know which one is public housing or regular housing. I do, because the regular ones sell for $125,000. And so where the kids used to play at the garbage bins because they didn't have backyards, they now have backyards. And houses that used to look like that now look like this because of one economic development strategy. And I could go back down the list and pull out a number of sources. You know, we have a lot of houses that people have said, you tear down. Let's not invest in this. But we have a lot of kids after school who don't have a place to go. So we decided to, do our own charter school. And now we have no more latchkey kids because they have their own charter school, which houses over 200 kids. And the street that I grew up in front of that we said urban renewal would take care of has been completely restored. This is the 1300 block of Liverpool Street, that street Arthur Ziegler wanted to save that's now on the cover of Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, and the kids love it because that's more important than the buildings. Matter of fact, they get bused away to school, they come home, they call it Chester County. They don't call it Manchester. They get, how kids give their own hip name. This is a half a house. It is, half a house. You see the line in the back to the left right there? See the imprint? That's where the other half of the house used to be. That's when I killed them other houses, see, and we were able to save this half a house. And he loves it. Family does. Oh, that minister that tore that church down, this is his house. He loves it too. This is why we do this. These are our future pilots. These are the ones that will come after us. Black, white, male, female, Chicano, Hispanic, Latino. Doesn't matter. We have to leave something from them. They're going to be the pilots. Actually, they decided to get their pictures taken because I promised them to take their pictures if they pick up that trash. And they did. This is who I do it for, my sons. You see, because I understand very clearly, if you can leap past whatever psychological or historical obstacles that keep you from drinking from the incredibly nourishing and replenishing water of one's history, you can do anything. You can defy any level of structure. When you fully claim your history, you can soar. Thank you.